All right, before we start, I will say again that if we don't have you do any practice after that last video, then we should have our hands slapped. You're going to practice that a lot because there's a lot of information there that you need to figure out how to use. And I just want to review very quickly. We have variable means that it happens at random times. We don't know. Fixed means it happens regularly. And then we have ratio, which means number of times. Ratio is a number. So remember, a ratio is a number, like 2 to 1 is a number, and then interval is time. And if you understand those, then you can put that together. And the last thing I want to tell you is that Mr. Davis emphasized that variable ratio is what your phone does to you. And your phone basically makes you addicted to it. And there are a lot of people coming out of Google and places like that saying we're doing a real bad job governing these companies because they're making us addicted. Your phone is making you addicted with every ding, with every alert that you get. Every app within there is making you addicted. So it's just dangerous stuff. So if you find that you're having a hard time putting your phone down, that's by design. That's not that they are taking advantage of that variable ratio schedule and they know it works. Okay, so we've talked about reinforcement. Now let's talk about punishment. Because punishment is kind of a big deal. Power usually disappears when the threat of punishment is removed. The example I like to give is, let's say you find out that the State Patrol is not going to be giving out tickets this weekend. What do you think traffic on the freeway is going to look like? It's going to be, I mean, people are going to drive as fast as they can. And you say, well, what's the problem with that? Well, the reason you drive slower is it's better fuel efficiency and it's more safe. But when you're teaching somebody to do something only because they're afraid of being punished, as soon as that threat of punishment goes away, they go back to their old behavior. The best way to modify behavior is to teach people why doing the right thing is good, not punishing them for doing the bad thing. This it often triggers aggression. Skinner basically toward the end of his career said, don't use punishment, because all it does is if I punish you, you get mad at me. If you punish a child, the child gets mad at the parent. They're not thinking about their behavior. They're only thinking about the person who punished them, so it makes them aggressive. It inhibits learning new responses. If I say, don't do that, then you stop. Well, what do you do? Who knows? We've talked about this before in a previous video. So what we need to do is figure out how to modify behavior to make it so that people will do that thing we want them to do instead of stop doing the thing we don't want them to do. Positively reinforce the behavior that we would like to see. The other thing, and you all have known that, when we rely on punishment, you'll say, well, he did it. Why are you punishing him and not me? That guy up there was speeding. What about me? So it just ends up backfiring. Punishment, and I know some of you are going to say, hey, parents, come over here and take a look at this. I want you to see what Mr. Woodard is saying. If I need to stop a dangerous behavior right away, like if you're drinking and driving or something like that, yeah, punishment stops that behavior. It's really not good for the long term, but if I need you to stop immediately, I don't have time to positively reinforce. So that's really the only time punishment is good, is if it's emergent. It's something that needs to be done right away. Otherwise, you just really shouldn't do it. This is what Skinner said. Reinforcement should be chosen over punishment every chance you get. Okay? That's how you build good behaviors. There's an alternative to punishment, and this is called the premack principle, and we'll show you this video. And the premack principle basically says this. You want to build a good behavior, so what you will do is you will reinforce a less preferred activity with a more preferred activity, and basically you do this all the time. It's pretty basic. You don't want to study for that test, right? But you say, you know what, if you study for an hour, you can have a bowl of ice cream. That's the premack principle. So you're saying, I'm going to take a behavior that I don't want to do, but I'm going to reinforce it with a behavior that I do want to do. That is the premack principle. And the mnemonic I always use was, whatever, if you like mac and cheese, whatever you don't want to do, you do it the pre-mac and cheese. So you study for an hour. That's the pre-mac and cheese. And then after you study, the reward is the mac and cheese. So it's the premack principle. The premack stuff is the stuff that you don't want to do, and the mac is the stuff that you do want to do. Okay, pretty basic. And then we're going to do something on shaping in class, and it's going to be fun. We'll have to modify it a bit, but I'll show you the video and we'll do an activity. We can talk about this, and this is really the last thing I'm going to say here today, because we're going to move on past operant and classical conditioning. A lot of people still kind of have a hard time telling the difference between the two. So classical conditioning happens before the response or behavior. So I pair the food with the bell, and then you salivate. So the behavior occurs after the fact. So think of Pavlov. It's pairing those things before. And classical conditioning is a reflex. It is not a voluntary behavior. Then we have operant conditioning, which occurs after a response or behavior. So you do something, I either punish you or I reinforce you. I either add something or I subtract something based on your behavior. So the reinforcer or punisher comes after the response. There's a great video we're going to watch in class, and I'll show you the difference, and you should be able to get that. Really, the other thing too is if you just think, what is the response? Is it a reflex or is it a voluntary behavior? If it's a reflex, it's classical. If it's voluntary, it's operant. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about some forms of learning that aren't just behavior. They're in the brain. And by the way, Skinner would try to tell you, your brain is just a black box. I don't really care what happens in the brain. That's what Skinner would say. I don't care what happens in the brain. The only thing I want is things that I can measure, and I can measure behaviors. And he said, basically, all behavior is operant behavior. And these other people you're going to see coming up in the next video or two, they said, Skinner, not so fast. Just because you have a hammer doesn't mean that every problem is a nail, okay? So here's what they said. So the first example that I love is a cognitive map. And with a cognitive map, here's what happens. Now let's say, the example I give in class is, let's say you needed to drive to Ferris. So those of you who drive, and some of you even who don't drive, know how to get to Ferris. And I'd ask you, well, how would you drive to get to Ferris? And some of you would say, well, I would drive up Grand, I would take a left on 37th, then I would just go straight, and then I would take a right in there. Now, here, this is where, so that's, you just gave me what's called chained association. You will see right here, chained association. First I do this, then I do this, then I do this. So, example, let's say you said, how do I get to Ferris? And I said, well, hop onto Grand, go up to 37th, take a left on 37th, and then you'll hit Ferris. Well, what if 37th is closed? You're out of luck, right? Because I've broken that chain of associations. Now, if I have a chained association and one of the links is broken, I'm out of luck. Can you get to Ferris if 37th is closed? A lot of you are saying, oh yeah, I get to Ferris. Well, you have a cognitive map. Now, here's the thing. If I said, I want you to take a route to Ferris that you've never taken before, I want you to get there in a way that you've never taken. Could you do it? A lot of you could. I don't know with the Google Maps the way they're going now. I don't know if you could, but you probably could. That's because you have a cognitive map. Now, here's where Skinner would go. Oh, you kind of got me on this one. Because how could you do something that you've never been reinforced to do? If you can take a route you've never taken before and still get there, you've done something brand new that has never been reinforced before. So Skinner would say, I don't have an explanation for that. That all we're talking about from here on out is things that Skinner can't explain. He cannot explain a cognitive map. That happens. It happens in your brain. It is not behaviorally reinforced. It is a map that is sitting in your brain that, I mean, I could probably do 150 different routes to Ferris. I mean, some of them would be stupid routes, but I could do 150 routes. And most of them have not been reinforced before because I take the same way every time. That is a cognitive map. Okay, let's see what the next one is. And then, oh, I love this one. This is a little cartoon about cognitive maps. Bathroom. Sure, it's just down the hall to the left, jog right, left, another left, straight past two more lefts, then right, and it's at the end of the third corridor on your right. That is a chained association. Now, and these are rats in a maze. That's the joke. But that's chained association. If one of those turns is blocked, that mouse is lost. A rat, whatever it is. That's the value of a cognitive map. No matter how many different routes are blocked, you can still get there. You know what? I'm going to stop. It's exactly 10 minutes. Here we go. Take it away, Mr. Davis.